data governance isn't necessarily the most rock and roll thing in the world. With AI, where data is getting pumped into all sorts of different things, understanding the lineage of data and then making sure you've got the right governance around it, about what you can use where and when, is really vital. Do you have in place clear policies, processes, accountabilities, oversight, governance to manage the compliance change within your data organisation? And are you making sure that your teams are empowered and have clear understanding about accountabilities, about what their data products are? So it's not about measuring loads of stuff. It's been quite deliberate and thoughtful about what you measure.
Well, Rob, thank you for coming on today. I'm really interested to find out a bit more about your background and some advice that you have for our networks within the kind of data space. I think obviously a really good place to start would be some context into your work history and what you've been getting up to. Obviously, a really interesting combination with a product background, data background, and the combination of the two. So, I guess.
Shall I give you my bio?
That would be good. Start with the bio.
Well, thanks for the invite. Great to be here, Daisy. So I'm currently the global head of data and content at the Economist Intelligence Unit, and that is a division within the Economist group. So most people would have heard of the paper. So we call it the paper, we don't call it the magazine. That's what I've learned. You call it the paper. So most people will be familiar with that. But the division of the EIU, or the Economist Intelligence Unit, has been around for about 80 years and is the data analysis and insight division within the Economist group. And it sits at the intersection of politics, policy and economics, providing analysis and insight to the market. How to navigate geopolitics, country risk, look for opportunities, and obviously there's lots of that going on. Yeah. So this is fascinating place to work, and I'm sure we'll explore that a little bit and some of the data products we build out there. Prior to that, I was at the London Stock Exchange most recently, and really the last 10, 15 years, I say 10, but it is actually 15. This is when you start to realise how quickly time's gone. I've been in data and product management roles, and most of those have been fairly large, transformational, multi-year programs. So I've worked on programs where we've been closing down point solutions and putting them onto one strategic user interface. I've been building out data platforms. I've worked in the risk management space as well and sort of built out AML and GRC and ERM, all the acronyms of products. So I've got, I think, a good understanding of the financial markets space, so the buy side, wealth management, investment management, portfolio managers, and the sell side, banks, consultants, corporates, and sort of academia and intergovernmental organisations as well, and what those personas and users need when they're interacting with data and products. And that's evolved a lot over the last 15 years, and maybe we'll dig into that a bit too.
Yeah. That's really interesting, and I think having the combination of product experience as well as data experience as well, because it provides you with that ability to think strategically and to be able to allow vision rethinking within the organisations that you're working in. And I think where the industry is becoming a lot more data driven, ever so important to be able to have that, I guess, kind of like that mindset and that approach. So how has that enabled you to, to empower decisions across organisations that you've worked in before, and to kind of be better at decision making and such?
What, because I've been around for so long? Is that because I've been around for so long? What have you learned around product and data management? I think one of the, maybe two things, and I'm sure we'll maybe dig into this a little bit more. I'm going to say two things that maybe are fairly obvious, but actually it's often people forget these things. The first one is you've always got to listen to your client. Such an obvious thing to say, but actually you get really carried away when you're building something. It could be a product or data, whatever it is you're building. You can internalise quite a bit. You can get a bit self-indulgent about what you're building. So always reminding that you've got to go back and validate and speak to your client. It could be an internal client, it could be internal stakeholders or your sales team, as well as often most of my career I've been working with external clients where we've been commercialising something, but always coming back to that. Why are we building it? What value are we trying to deliver? And then the other piece, and I think this is maybe there's been a change a more overt change over the years on this second point, which is about empowering teams and figuring out how you get more agility into teams and accountabilities and scale. And so I'm a huge believer that if you really want to have an effective organisation, you need to be able to trust your teams to be able to get on with it. And particularly, I think, when you get to data management and some of the sort of architectural principles that come in, there's a big piece in there around that sort of accountabilities and empowerment. So, yeah, they're two things that over the years, as my hairline's receded, that I've picked up as,
These
these are the two, I suppose these are the load stars. These are the North Stars.
Yeah.
You can't have two North Stars. I've got two North Stars that you hold on to, and you think when you're in a new team or a new group, what are the things you should come back to and check that you're doing these things well.
And within your team now, within EIU, you mentioned, high level a bit about areas of focus and what you're getting up to. But in terms of the actual data products themselves, probably taking a step back. For those who are listening and maybe interested to get into this space to begin with, what. If you could kind of give a bit of an explanation around what the data product is and what that means for your business and area of focus.
Yeah, good. Yeah, great. I think so. Yeah, let's talk about what a data product is. I've been thinking, how do you come up with a pithy data product definition? I don't think I've got one, incidentally. So I'm not gonna trail something. But I think it's something that is designed and managed to deliver value to a client. Actually, that was quite good.
That was good.
That was off the cuff. Yeah, so that's quite good. But the way, and I did for LinkedIn aficionados, I did a little post the other day drawing out characteristics of a data product. And I think that's probably more helpful than some sort of soundbite definition, because it starts to make you think about what a data product is and isn't, and maybe some of them are on a bit of a journey, as you put the rigor around it. So this idea that you're quite deliberate in why you're putting the data product together, that it has someone actively managing it, that you've got a high emphasis on quality, that it's something that is repeatable or persists. It's not a sort of ad hoc, infrequent product. I think these are the sorts of characteristics that are important. Lots of things exist, and data and analysis exists, but it won't always have all of those particular characteristics. And then I think you've got challenges when you take it to market, or you try and commercialise it, or push it through different distribution channels.
And how does this kind of reflect within the EIU?
Within the EIU? Well, yeah, maybe just to give a bit of background or outline of what I think there's three areas of data products in the broadest sense that the EIU produces. The first is our structured forecast data, and this is probably what we're most known for and win awards on. So we cover 200 countries, provide short, medium, long-term macroeconomic forecasts for those markets. So structured content. The second is the supporting contextual analysis that goes alongside that. So unstructured data, these come in a variety of different reports and updates. We cover industries as well as countries, commodities. But that would provide the backdrop and the analysis around the supporting sort of forecast information. Why are things happening? And then the third area are our ratings and indices. So here we've got a sort of suite of scores, rating indices, some of which would be good to maybe we can talk a bit further. We have a financial risk index. So this would look at the sort of credit worthiness of a country, operational risk, so the risks associated with doing business in a country. Business environment ranking, so how easy is it to do business in a particular market? All these tools are trying to provide risk managers, procurement officers, strategists, corporate strategists with understanding about the risks and opportunities involved in their supply chain and working in these markets. And we also produce a livability index, so which cities are the best to live in the world. And most recently, we just did the update of our democracy index, which is quite pertinent, at the moment. Pretty unprecedented times. Any sort of politics podcast overuses the word unprecedented at the moment. I can't remember when it was precedented. Everything's been unprecedented for so long. But the democracy index is a really interesting piece of analysis, and I'll answer the question about sort of linking it back to the data products in a moment. So we've been producing that, just to dive into that, because it's, and I'd sort of encourage everyone to go onto the EIU website and have a look at that latest report. It's been going for about 20 years. It's updated annually, and it looks at a point in time score of the state of democracy in the world, so country by country, covers over 160 countries, and scores them on a scale between 0 and 10 of democracies through to more authoritarian regimes. Now, the scary bit is there is a demise of democratic regimes. There's a sort of democratic deficit, or recession maybe that's happening. But to bring it back to the sort of the data. The data management question, we've been producing that for some time, but actually we've not been producing it in such a way, or providing the data in such a way, that if you wanted to, say, look at the time series of those changes, that you could get access to that with ease. Yeah. So I think that's quite a good example of a high quality, great bit of analysis with supporting numerical, so structured and unstructured data. You're really insightful. But actually, when you go from one year to the next, we've not really thought through until now how do we present this as a data product in the round. Yeah. So can you look at the scores of a country with ease and see the change over time? Can you compare maybe the sub elements, what's happened to the rule of law, what's happening to free and fair elections in a country over time? Can you take these series and then compare them to other indicators? What's the percentage of GDP that sits within democratic countries? How's that changed over time? These are the things that people are going to want to do with the underlying data. We've made it available now through our desktop product Viewpoint, which is a great step forward. In that sense that you can really dig into the data and start to interrogate it. And we're going to start to distribute that through other mechanisms that are quite common in the market now. So marketplaces, for example, this should be available in marketplaces so people can get on, play around with the data, see whether it's fit for purpose for whatever sort of analysis they're doing. Yeah. It was a long answer, that. Yeah, was that good?
It was a good answer. It was a long answer. And that's why it's something that I was really interested to dive into, because I think within the kind of the nature of the business that you're working in, obviously data is absolute kind of pinnacle, right? It's absolutely key to make sure that you've got effective, robust data, robust services and products in place. And working in an environment like that, where it is, I guess, kind of where it is managed so kind of successfully, what kind of advice would you give to organisations, to leaders, to ensure that you can constantly, I guess, kind of evolve products and services in a way where they are robust and effective?
So, robust data management sort of processes.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think you might get another long answer, Daisy.
Yeah, long answers are good answers.
You have a drink.
Have some sparkling water and I'll listen.
I think you could reel off like 7, 8, 9 things. I'll tell you a story actually. About years ago, I worked in the US and I was running the business there for a macroeconomic software product called DataStream, which is a great service. Other data providers are available, but I was running there, and I was doing some training with the sales team, and I was trying to illustrate to them that there was 3 USPs, sort of value propositions to DataStream, and it was content, analytics, and usability. And sort of hang on, and at the end, the American sales manager came up to me and he goes, "Russ, I loved the way you just put everything around these three things: content, analytics, and the other one. So he'd forgotten the third. So I thought, actually, with the rule of three, you really want to try and keep it. But I think on that, I'm going to go for 4 things I think you could use at an organisation for good data management. I think the first one is around data governance, and this gets hotter and hotter. This is something actually over the last 4 years, 5 years, seems to just be constantly cranking up. So do you have in place clear policies, processes, accountabilities, oversight, governance to manage the compliance change within your data sort of organisation?
And would you say this is step one?
I think this is table stakes stuff. This is really important that you understand. I'm not actually. Maybe I am going to graduate up to things that are the most important. But I think these 4 things, I'm going to bundle them together. I think you sort of have to move on all fronts of these really, and you could frame it in slightly different ways. But the reason I start with that one, I've joked previously with a colleague of mine that data governance isn't necessarily the most rock and roll thing in the world. But you jump up in the morning, digital rights. But it is so important, and actually it sort of, I don't mean to sound flippant with AI, and where where data is getting pumped into all sorts of different things, understanding the lineage of data and then making sure you've got the right governance around it about what you can use where and when is really vital. And actually you could put into there capabilities like data catalogues, which are a mechanism for discoverability, but also are the way to anchor that need to have robust data governance. I think that's the first part. The second bit, I would do a very broad grouping of what technology are you using and what sort of technical architecture you think do you have in place. So that could be inclusive of the tools you need to do data cleansing, right through to actually how your data estate is mapped out and the infrastructure that underpins it. And there's debates. I've been in conversations going back with architects debating the difference between data meshes and data fabric. See, I don't know if this is going to get too deep, right? But almost become like sort of religious 1600s wars of religion type of debates about which one's the most important. Do you go for a mesh where it's decentralized data domains, you're empowering individual teams, you federate governance, or do you have a data fabric where you've got an integrated data layer that is managed by AI and metadata and automated and so on? I mean, the thing is they're both complementary, and that's But anyway,
and a quick question on that. I mean, so I know you've worked with a lot of larger organisations, and obviously it varies from business to business. But do you feel like there is, I suppose that there is a one size fits all type approach. But have you seen like a pattern in the past where there is between the two there is a better approach to that depending on like size and structure?
I think the. I mean, if you were going to those two extremes, the idea of mesh is great when you've got a big organisation and you want to get scale because you're empowering the teams to run sequentially. Fabrics, if you've got sort of diverse data sources, you want to encourage discoverability. But I think your point, the crux of your point, is that you've got to cherry pick what you want. And so, sort of joking about these sort of academic architectural debates, which are fascinating, but really what that should lead to is you figuring out what pieces you want to take together to fit whatever your strategy or goal is. And actually leads into the third point because the third one, I think, is about your culture, your data culture. You could put a lot under that umbrella. Arguably, maybe that's the first point in all of these things, because you've got to think about do you have people that are data literate? Do you encourage data visualization? I keep saying the word, but are you making sure that your teams are empowered and have clear understanding about accountabilities, about what their data products are? That sounds like, how easy is that? Pete, you're in charge of it. It's really not. It really isn't. If you've got an organisation that is probably easier if you're starting from scratch. I mean, but if you've got an organisation that's an ongoing concern, there's lots of people that are involved in managing what may or may not be yet a robust data product.
Yeah.
There's lots of people have got... So changing, being clear on who's accountable for it and what the roles and remits are is a huge bit of change. And so that cultural piece, empowerment, literacy and all of that, that's a large bit. And then I think through there you would be thinking about sort of the architecture that you want. And then the fourth one, again, you could probably fold this into one of the early ones, but I think is important. It's about what you measure.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting thing. You see, I've sort of observed over the years, sometimes you get this habit of people thinking, or organisations or teams thinking, that measuring loads of stuff is great. So like, oh look, no, we do. We're data centric because we just measure everything. There'd be like tableaus everywhere, Excel spreadsheets, numbers, and it's baffling. You can't sort of, what's the value? I can't figure out what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
So it's not about measuring loads of stuff. It's been quite deliberate and thoughtful about what you measure. So when what are the KPIs that are really going to drive change, or that you're focused on, and elevating those pieces out of all of that data. So the reason I think it's worth calling that measure out is measuring or KPIs out in particular is because it really forces you to think about what you measure. And the best way to do that is to link it to the third thing and ask the team. So over the years, this is sort of a technique I've done quite a few times. If there isn't a lot in the way of metrics or measurements, you can empower the team to do that rather than tell them what to do or what you think, because they probably know better anyway. They just need to build up the muscle to think in that way, and they'll produce the measurements and then sort of figure out how they sort of best run those metrics.
And I guess within larger scale organisations, that's probably more, being more of a focus for you. Do you feel like across those 4 areas, any of those 4 are particularly difficult and challenging? And like, if so, what, I guess, advice that you could give people that are or leaders that are stepping into that type of environment or set up for the first time? Because have you seen kind of patterns in challenges that you've encountered across those areas? Yeah,
I think the third one is the hardest. If you're putting in a data culture and all the pieces, again, it's quite a broad umbrella, but all the pieces that come in under that, there's lots of information about good data governance and practice. We worked with Microsoft for a long time at the London Stock Exchange, and there's I led on the data platform work stream about building out programmatic delivery of non-real-time data using Microsoft. So there's phenomenal technical capabilities and components that are out there. The third one is about culture, and that's hard to change. And people have vested in the way things have been operating. They have an emotional attachment to the way things have been operating. They can feel quite threatened about it. It's the easiest thing to shy away from. It's the hardest thing to confront. So I think that would be the one that I would lean into the most. And you can do that in a sensitive, humble way. This is why I think it's important it takes a bit longer probably than dictating how things should be done, but it will be a lot more successful. And so those are the things that's what I've deployed over the years. Working with the team to think about what are they doing, what's the purpose of what they're doing, how do they get crisper about what they're measuring, how do they understand the success of what they're doing, and where you might have to step in is figure out then roles and remits and how that works with other teams. But generally, people get more fulfillment when they're very clear about what they're doing. They're probably most of the time, if you don't know who's accountable, it's because you've not been crisp enough, and actually everyone gets a bit frustrated about that.
Yeah. And so you mentioned kind of like measuring the culture as well as measuring the data and the kind of success of that. Can you go overkill with the measuring of culture as you can with data, or is there a sweet spot?
Yeah, I think there's most organisations will have some people survey on some sort of frequency. The things that tend to come up in data and product management, I think, are frustrations with organisation, execution, not clear on strategy or sort of purpose, fulfillment. So I think that's probably the best thing to measure. You sort of as long as you've got a barometer like that, something like a pulse ticking over on it, for instance, I think that's probably how you measure whether you're getting your culture right. And then day to day, you're doing the things that I'm articulating. What can be difficult is some organisations or leaders or teams will think that there's real work, which is building this data product out, getting this thing to market, and there's sort of like secondary level work, which is all the fluffy stuff about helping your team understand what their purpose is and fulfillment, that cultural bit. I don't think of it like that. If you get that second, you've got to have that second bit working, a high performing team. That's how you get it. So I don't divorce the two. So as long as you can get over that mental hurdle, it's like, that is proper work.
Yeah. And I know this isn't necessarily something that we were really planning to talk about, and it's not something I'll go into in a lot of detail in. It's something that always comes up in podcasts, obviously AI and the whole world, the status of how things are at the moment. But have you ever found it difficult within organisations to help organisations to understand the importance of the value of data and data management? I think now it's something that's becoming a lot easier to do because of AI, and businesses want to be data driven and they want to implement AI, and they need to know that they have effective data products and processes in place before they can even think about it. So I guess it's something that probably isn't so much of a barrier as such now. But has that ever been the case where you've had to try to, encourage and to show the value of what it is that you're doing?
I think you're right. I think the drive, the lead of AI is making organisations realise that some of the stuff we've been talking about is table stakes. There's a habit. You've just got to do AI somewhere. Everyone's got to do something with AI and which is a bit weird because you really need to think about what the end value is that you're trying to deliver. But playing around with things is great. But that does then make organisations realise about how good are some of the things that we were talking about a moment ago, their governance and data management processes or not. But I think if you go back, because this is all evolving quite quickly and rapidly over the last sort of years, I think there is I think it's hard. It has been. I've been in organisations where it's harder for different parts of the organisation of any seniority to understand what are you talking about. People understand product management. And agile product management, that's something that's evolved over the years. But then, sort of the importance of data management and data as an asset, whether that's your internal data sets and how you're managing those and making those accessible and the value that can bring, or whether you're taking products and commercialising them, or both maybe, and what you need to invest in to get that done, and potentially what cultural changes you need to make. I think that is harder, or has been harder. You're getting dragged a bit with the AI, but yes, I think it's a harder hurdle to get over, especially because some of it's internalised, and so people tend to be focused on sort of client value outwards.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think over the last year or so now, since ChatGPT and everything that's come with that. We've had so many more conversations with clients about them trying to improve their data governance, and it's all things that I feel like can often be sort of pushed to one side. But now it's been that thing to then make them realise, right, these are the things, and it's those 4 pillars that you've discussed, right? It's like in order to be able to start thinking about the nice shiny things, it's like we've got to get these foundations right first. So it's interesting to hear you talk through that. And then,
well, one of the things, actually, just as you just reminded me of something, because this is quite pertinent to what we're looking at the moment at the EIU. As I said, the organisation's been around for almost as old as me. It's been around like 80 years. So I was worried there, Ewan. But and we at the moment we play very strongly with corporates, with intergovernmental organisations, academics, and in financial services as well. But we're really focusing on financial services at the moment. or over the next sort of period of time, and thinking about the personas in that space, the data consumers. So the language we're using now is data consumer, data manipulator, data integrator. So a consumer being an analyst, portfolio manager, economist, a data manipulator being a data scientist, an integrator being someone in the technical team, figuring out how they can plug our capabilities into their infrastructure. And what are their workflows, and where do we need to turn up? But part of that, or a big chunk of thinking that through, is, do we have good data governance processes? I don't think this is unique to financial services, what I'm about to say, but I do think they maybe have been sort of leading on some of this. They're highly attuned to compliance and governance and digital rights concerns. We saw this at the London Stock Exchange when I was working with with Microsoft. Huge theme for clients. Discoverability is using AI, getting end value, all of that too, but always this digital rights thing will come up. So we're thinking through, how do we make sure that as we really push into that space, we have these things in place to make sure that clients are happy and understand that not only can we have the data, but they're allowed to use it in certain ways and through certain workflows. But at the moment, predominantly we provide our content through a human interface. As I mentioned, Viewpoint. We have API capabilities, but we're going to be pushing more on that programmatic channel, marketplaces, other vendors, ramp our API and other programmatic distribution out. And the nature of that means that you do need to have some of these capabilities to a very high state of operation and sort of robustness.
And when, as you touched on it at the start, across EIU, the different types of data products, and obviously there's a lot that goes into those. How do you make sure that you are capturing the right data insights? And obviously there's so much that you're covering. How do you kind of ensure that it is correct and you're deriving the right value add to your clients?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, we have an amazing team of analysts that are country orientated and experts in their country or region, and they know, they're plugged into what's going on in those industries and those countries, and so they know what's critical. As part of the analysis, we've recently brought in a new chief economist, Constance, who's phenomenal. She's based in the US, and she will do a weekly summary of from the chief economist on LinkedIn again, if you
Nice.
get that. So there is a team of experts that underpins the data products that I mentioned. But alongside that, we have a robust research management process. We have a model framework where our forecasts are produced that have controls and rigor around them. There's lots of checks that happen to make sure that when things go out, so the updating of the forecast, the structured data, that's done to a certain time, to a certain level of quality, and are there outliers, and we check all that. Even the research that's written, so these analysts that are steeped in their country and their market, and they know what's going on, they'll write through our processes, and then it will hit teams downstream that are looking at that from a quality perspective. Is it consistent? Is the formatting right? Can it be written in a style that maybe is more provides more sort of brevity, or do the tables and the charts all add up? Get sort of consistent. So there's a number of different controls that go in. One of the things actually was happening just before I joined was an acknowledgement that, again, this is not really breaking news, what I'm about to say, but that lots of words isn't always the best route in. The cliche, a picture is 1,000 words and stuff. So we've been doing work on making our visualizations. So it could be tables, it could be graphics, as in some sort of chart. It could be a map. bringing more visualizations into the analysis and the value of that. Now that means you've got to have certain styling and controls around that. So a huge amount of work on making sure that these things are within the report, but also eye-catching. But one thing that so everyone thinks it's a good idea, but do we measure any of that?
Yeah.
So we've been thinking about, well, okay, yes, great, visualizations are good, but what's the right proportion? Are people reading more when you've got more visualizations in the report? The thesis is yes, they are, but that's all good to say. You've got to sort of measure and check, and then are they the right sort of style of report? So that's the sort of thing that goes on day to day. You'll have an idea, you'll make sure that it seems to make sense, but you've still got to check and measure and come back and test.
Is that the sweet spot? How frequently?
You might have to ask me back when we've done a better job of measuring it and understanding, because this is sort of something that's rolling out now. But I think I think there is I think it makes a lot of sense to have more visualizations in. But yes, there would be a sweet spot with being able to have the sort of corresponding analysis to sort of help navigate wherever you're looking at.
When you're distributing like different data products, obviously there's challenges that comes with that. One of them being, I guess not necessarily knowing how well that's going to land or value it will add, which you can then use. You can then measure to track if that will be effective or not. But what other challenges do you see, if any, or is that the kind of the main challenge? Is kind of, I guess, being able to understand how effective it will be.
Yeah. Well, so this is quite timely, because one of the things that we're keen to do, I mentioned earlier, was think about how we put some of our data products out over different channels. And so what the first step on that is looking at them as they are, and do they fit the criteria that we were talking about earlier? Do they persist? Have they got all the quality checks? Are they in a format that's usable for the client? So we're going through a little bit of that with a few of them now, because we want to be presenting them through other distribution channels. I mentioned sort of marketplaces, and this is something that we hope to do relatively soon. But in a way, the first step there is sort of put them out and then learn and iterate from there. So because we don't have yet a presence on some of these in some of these sort of different distribution paths, the first step is just to have a go, and we'll probably get a few things wrong, and I'll blame someone else. No, I'm obviously joking. But we'll probably get a few things wrong, but you'll learn about that, and then you can iterate. So that's quite important, because you've got to be able to get the balance right by putting in a little bit of effort, doing something that sort of is sensible, figure out how you measure that, and what we'll be measuring in as we start to put some services up on the on marketplaces is, are we getting traction? Are we getting revenue? Do we get sort of follow-ons from sort of marketing that we sort of push out around it, and then course correct from there. So I think there is a bit of a balance between doing something that seems sensible because of the experience or the feedback you've got on market trends, and then making sure that you don't go sort of flood the zone. Yeah. That's a sort of Trumpism, but flood the zone of just doing. But you've got to then say, okay, well we're going to gate it. Let's have a sort of sanity check. We've hit that first milestone. Where do we go next?
And there's always going to be the challenges that come with distributing those different data products. But what would you say are the main growth opportunities within within that space, and probably more so within EIU, kind of the growth opportunities that you sense within the business? So
I think there's a general point, and then I'll relate it to the EIU. At the moment, I think if you've got data products that are not following some of the criteria that I mentioned earlier, then it's very hard to scale them.
Yeah.
So that having this sort of little table that I put together, some of the characteristics there are about them being managed and consistent, so that you can use the same product in in different channels or for different use cases.
Yeah.
And that's the trick, really, because if you get that right, you're not bespoking everything. So anything when it's customized or bespoked, that you're putting an effort on yourself. What you really want if you're a business like ours is you want lots of subscription revenue on data products that you're pushing out through multiple channels.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the real pivots that we're making. We produce huge amounts, and have been doing for years, of high quality analysis, structured and unstructured data. And I've mentioned it a few times, the different indices and ratings that we push out. Primarily, we present them through a human interface. So you've got like a goodie box.
Yeah.
It's like Quality Street.
Yeah.
At Christmas, or again, whatever is your other chocolates are available. Your celebrations.
I'm a celebration.
See, again, I'm showing my age because I'm Quality Street.
Can't go wrong with Quality Street.
Yeah.
But there's more selection.
I've got all the chocolate, all the confectionery. I've lost my train of thought. But yes, but you've got this. So you've got this goodie box. But what it relies on is someone turning up and looking in the box and sort of digging around. So where's the toffee crunch?
Yeah.
So what we want to. This is not an either or either. That's great. And a huge amounts of personas use that today, get great value out of it. I'm saying this in regard to the EIU, but I don't think this is unique to the EIU, right? That sort of pattern. To complement that and to present our content to other user personas that I think will get huge amounts of value, particularly in financial services, we need to meet them in their workflow. Their workflow isn't going to be to go to a point solution and dig into it. They're working in, and it could be anything. It could be in Teams. They could be in Excel. They could be in another software product. I mentioned DataStream earlier. They could be in a Bloomberg, FactSet, Workspace from the London Stock Exchange. They might have their own proprietary system. So how do you plug into those? And the way to do that is with programmatic delivery, but you do that with consistent packaging. So that's what we're working through, and I think that sort of really does get to good data management and good sort of data sort of product management, and how do you put that together and then push it through all the channels. So you're using the same thing, but you're using it through different channels to hit different personas and use cases.
I guess is that what's next for EIU?
That's what we're working on now. Absolutely, yeah. That's what we're pushing on now. So it's not that we don't play in the financial services space. We absolutely do. But how can we make our data more available and present it in workflows so that it's there for the user, and maybe for slightly different personas that we've previously not targeted, because we haven't turned up as we should be doing in those channels. Yeah.
And I guess what if you had kind of looking to the future, how do you think that would then impact the future of EIU, and for what that would then enable you as a business to be able to do? Do you have kind of like
ambitions?
Ambitions, a plan in place, and what that would then mean for the business?
Yeah, so that's very much part of the growth strategy. We also are pushing very hard on the US market, and I mentioned Constance, our chief economist, is out there because that's an area where we think we could have a higher profile. So there's absolutely part of the growth strategy, and I think to make the brand, and it is a great brand, but it's probably not as well known as it should be particularly in the financial services sort of data and analytics space. It's a bit of just a few reasons for that. The Economist group, the mind goes to understandably to the newspaper, but the Economist Intelligence Unit, it's got good pedigree, great assets, and we just need to unlock those a little bit. I think that's the opportunity. So you're not necessarily creating tons of new data either. This is about making sure that the stuff that we do produce is in the right format and that we can push it out through the channels. And so that's that's the promise over the next sort of year or so. And if it goes successfully, maybe we can come back and talk about it. If it doesn't, maybe I'll come back in a different job.
We'll talk about what's gone wrong.
Yeah, we do it at Christmas and we get a box of celebrations.
We'll just everything not to do it.
Yeah.
No, thank you. It's been really interesting to talk to you today, and I'm excited to see where this takes EIU and how the business develops over the course of the next few years. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Great conversation.
Great. Cheers, Daisy.